Hello, Steve White, Steve White 89. Well, I've kind of been following the mushroom case on, I think the mushroom case daily on ABC, mostly because they had, reporters in the room sort of thing, and they seem to be fairly accurate and detailed, but they also seem to be totally biased. And there seemed to be this real desire to protect Erin and to portray her only in positive ways and not to consider anything negative. And part of this I just put down to them being biased, but I'm hearing that it actually was like court mandated, basically, that they weren't allowed to report certain things. Like they weren't allowed to point out the fact that she was in jail, that she was remanded in custody. She didn't get bail. She didn't go home. She basically was in jail the whole time, and they were bringing her over from the court each day in a tunnel under the thing. She'd pop up in the room, basically, and they weren't allowed to say things like that. They weren't allowed to say where she was because supposedly that would reflect negatively on her and could bias the jury. I'm like, maybe they should see her that way. She's a criminal. She killed people. She murdered her own family and tried to murder more people who just fortunately didn't show up. And the idea that we can't portray her as like a hardened criminal or something in jail who's being brought from jail every day, that's who she is. That's where she should be. That's where she now is going to be, because she was found guilty when she was obviously guilty from the start. And I get some people, it's unclear, so I guess it might be a problem because you might be portraying someone negatively. But in this case, it was clear from the beginning, from so many things, that this was deliberate. It wasn't an accident. There was no question it was an accident. There's no question. There was just no question it was an accident. She made separate portions. She put on different coloured plates. She wasn't sick when everyone else was sick. She left the hospital. She just all these things that were so obvious that couldn't be explained as like panic afterwards or anything. She wiped phones, remotely, so to get rid of evidence from the police, and she just said all these things. It was so obvious, and the idea that you treat her like you can't even acknowledge that she's a criminal in a criminal trial that's suspected of murder, that she could be guilty. Like, to be objective and consider both sides of each circumstance, that's fair, but always err on one side because we don't want to alienate her to like the public. She's potentially a murderer, and that's what they should be considering and speaking about. So I at first was kind of offended, and I did a video saying that it seems like they're just biased, and now it's like, well, some of it I do think they were biased, but some of it was actually court stuff, and some of it does make sense. I'm not a total idiot. Obviously, if they're seeing things that the jury aren't seeing, because there were times where the jury would be let out so they could talk about elements that the jury wouldn't see or shouldn't see. So obviously we can't have the reporters reporting about that, and then the jury could hear it through the media or the family or something. So yes, some things can't be spoken about, need to wait until after the case has been heard and everything. That's fine. But other things, like just the description of her, they weren't allowed to describe her as she was or as she is, because that could bias people. And they it's like they were ordered to have her constantly shown in a positive light and always assume innocence, when you have to at least look at both sides and consider, yes, she could be innocent. This could have been panic or whatever, or mistake, but no, she might be guilty. It may have been premeditated and manipulation and cover up and lies. And they weren't allowed to explore that. They were only allowed to show one side of it. And I think that's just a really disturbing thing when you consider how biased that is. I guess it's also because she's white. She's a white woman, so she got treated differently. If this was a black man, the media would have been all in his business, and there he is in jail being dragged out and in doing a perp walk every day to the court case. It's just disappointing to realise the Australian legal system and the media is this biased and corrupt. Not even going to talk about race issues and Aboriginal deaths in custody and all this there's just so many issues. And this sort of doesn't have anything to do with that on that level, but it shows the complete opposite side of that. When it's a white person and a woman, it's totally different from if it's a male or a person of colour. And I just find it really disturbing that it wasn't just personal bias from the reporters, it's also like in the system and mandated. And like I said, some of it does make sense, but the rest of it is just bias and pandering towards, certain types and so forth. So yeah, I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of the ABC's Mushroom Case Daily coverage of the whole case and so forth. Because now an outsider they come out and say, well, now we can talk about the things we couldn't talk about, and only a few things made sense. The rest of it was just wrong. So yeah, I'm going to go and feel free to look at my channel for other videos, because YouTube is never going to put me up in your feed because they don't support small YouTube channels like